we have Diana Chepkemoi. Diana is currently halfway through her bachelor's degree in arts education at the Meru University of Science and Technology. Diana is a fighter, she's a conqueror who broke national and international news. But for tonight, again, for the first time ever, Diana is crowned a writer, and this is the first story she's ever written. Diana, when I was reading your story, I was infuriated. I was sad, I was angry, I was emotional. In the Somali language, we say, when we see any form of oppression, we say, digo kumadaka komia, which means, yes, it means, doesn't your blood move? Like, doesn't your blood boil with rage for seeing oppression, right? And I must say, it takes a lot of courage and mental tenacity to write this. You and I had this conversation last night about how a lot has been written about you, ever since your story went viral. But you admitted that you didn't see yourself in those stories. And in a way, you weren't done justice. And you decided to take matters into your own hand, quite literally, and give us a powerful first-hand account of what went down. And I really want to thank you for trusting Debunk with your story. Could you kindly tell us, or give us a quick synopsis of what your story is about, and then we can go into the reading.
This is my first time doing this. Okay, having gone through my story for the first time and reading it over and over again, I feel like there's a lot more I should have written, but this is just like a summary of it. So my story is basically about how the death of my father led me into becoming a slave. I thought I was ready for this.
You can take your time. You can take your time.
I tried to explain how I ended up in that situation. A situation I was aware of it. I knew what happens in Saudi Arabia. I used to watch YouTubes. I used to watch stories because I like documentaries a lot. So in my story, I feel like it doesn't say so much about it, but I tried. I feel I should write another story. And being here today is the first time I'm owning my story, and it's the beginning of my healing journey, and it's beginning of a different Diana. I know out there everyone knows Diana, the girl from Saudi Arabia. But today sharing my story, owning my story is the beginning of a different journey, because deep down I feel I have a responsibility, and my story was not in vain. I have a responsibility. There are other girls like me. There are other people out there like me whom their stories never made it to the media like mine did. So today, it's a beginning of a different Diana. Hopefully, it will be Diana the activist. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Diana. You can take us through your first reading.
The flight was uneventful and the airline staff completely courteous. Much as I didn't ask for anything, there was a feeling that they would be helpful in case I needed to. Going by how politely they treated those in my vicinity. After sitting for what seemed like a pleasant eternity, I had wanted to stay awake for the entirety of the flight and taking in, but caught a number of times caught, but caught myself a number of times catching 40 wings. We finally landed and disembarked, and we were met by friendly Saudi immigration officials. At arrivals, our Saudi agents gave each one of the girls a red rose, a fitting welcome into the land of milk and honey. That was my first time receiving a rose flower. The pandemic was still on, and the countries were still cautious. We were driven to a hotel for quarantine for 7 days. On the shuttle ride, I took in as much of Riyadh as I could. Skyscrapers, wide spotless streets, luxurious residential and commercial districts. Soon I would get some days off and tour the streets of Riyadh. I thought to myself. Post-quarantine, I was driven to my employer's 3-story home. I was being employed by a man who wanted me to take care of his daughter and her daughter, his granddaughter. All I can say is the family seemed powerful and well connected, and the man's granddaughter was never to be called by her name, but by a title which conveyed that she was royalty. I followed the rules. The first thing my host did, even before I could settle in properly, was to ask for my passport, which they confiscated. I felt like resisting, but looking around, I remembered I was at the mercy of Saudis. In their own house, in their own country. I started feeling like an early day character in those horror Saudi stories. With your passport confiscated, you either run away and get arrested and deported, or endure suffering and humiliation until the contract, which will be altered by the employer, wasn't necessarily binding, like in my case, was over. Or maybe I was overthinking. There was another African lady working in my employer's home, and in staying true to our sisterhood, she did everything she could to see that I found my footing. However, beyond that, this is the bathroom, this is the kitchen bits, and the standard, do not answer them back when they speak. I was generally supposed to find my own way, and this is where things got slippery very fast. Our hosts had been sold the lie that all the girls who were making the trip to Riyadh had previously worked in Saudi Arabia, and so the expectation was that I, just like any of the other girls, already knew the drill, whatever that drill was. Of course, there were cultural and religious differences. Our hosts were Arab Muslims, and a lot of us girls were neither, meaning there existed major and minor differences ranging from cuisine to beliefs to mannerisms. That there was an expectation for me to be of certain orientations or be in possession of certain skills out of my presumed prior stay in Saudi meant I was starting from a place of disadvantage. A clash of expectation which occurred immediately. As I found my way around the home, I quickly picked up that the madam, my boss and employer and henceforth, always slept during the day and was awake at night. This meant as much as I worked during the day, I needed to be on high alert after nightfall, since I could be called upon to attend to this, that, or the other at any minute. And so I slept with my clothes on, not wanting to risk being called upon and not responding immediately. Any kind of delay wasn't tolerated.
Powerful, very powerful, and very brave. What you went through, Diana, it's what's known as the kafala system. that's used in majority, if not all, Middle Eastern countries, especially the Gulf countries. And this is a system that started in the 1950s when these countries began, bringing large numbers of foreign laborers to their countries under what is called a kafala program or a sponsorship program, where your employers bind you to a contract for a specified time period. It's slavery, let's call it what it is. From your perspective and your harrowing, heartbreaking experience, how does the kafala system facilitate the exploitation and abuse of migrant workers? And what specific aspects of this system, this horrible system that you went through, what specific aspects of this system make it particularly effective at trapping workers in those exploitative situations?
The agents, they just like pick anyone who is in need of a job. It doesn't matter if you're educated, if you know where you're going, if you know the job you're going to do. So long as you are of age, you have a national ID, you are eligible. So you find like you don't have the resources to travel, but you are in need of a job. You can't pay your own ticket. You can't facilitate your own passport. You don't have a good conduct certificate. Even sometimes there are some who don't even have their birth certificates. But once the agent does all that for you, that is the first step of being in bondage. Because I remember in my case, like initially, when I left home to come to Nairobi, my plan wasn't to travel to Saudi Arabia. I thought I was traveling to Qatar. That's what I was told. So I went in, there are 2 medical tests you have to do, and that is money used. There's a small medical and a big medical. So once you go through those 2 medical tests, that is money used. You're already in bondage. And they already have your passport, they already have your ID. So when I learned that I was going to Saudi Arabia, I said, no, I don't want to go there. That is not where I was told I was going. So the agent sat me down and told me and kind of sweet-talked me into believing that Saudi Arabia was going to be a good place to work. And when I insisted, I said, no, I'm not going. Give me my passport and my ID. I want to go back home. I'm not going. Then they told me, then you have to pay us back the money that was used for medical. I didn't have that money. And that was the first bondage I got myself into. They used that to make me a bit softer, to be able to sit down and listen to what they were going to say. So I agreed to sit down and have a talk with them. And my agent promised me that wherever you're going, it's going to be a safe space. Like those stories you have heard in the medias, those stories you have seen, they are stories of girls who went to illegal agents who are not registered. I was told you are going to a registered agency and you'll be safe. So, nikaingia box. So,
Yeah, I couldn't explain it any better. Like no one could say, because we read Diana's story. We saw Diana's story everywhere. It went viral on socials, on news articles, everywhere. But when I first saw it and when I first read it, I was like, yes, now the story has been done justice. And given the explanation that you've given us of the whole kafala system and everything that you went through, I feel like now there's that catharsis that you've been looking for. I'll follow that up with a question of, you said this is a rebirth of Diana the activist. So what changes do you believe are necessary at both the national and international levels to protect individuals in similar situations? Because there are many who are still trapped in these situations. So is there any message that you'd like to convey, say, to policymakers to preemptively address and mitigate such risks? I ask this because especially now that we have a government that's so eager and keen to send Kenyans abroad as laborers?
Personally, I feel like there's a lot that has to be done. There's a lot of work, and that work has to start with me creating awareness. That's the first thing. And the, the second thing is our government, it's in a way, that's how I felt personally. It didn't really care. You just, the moment you cross the border, that is between you, your employer, and your God. That is it. No one follows up to know what is going on the other side. No one follows up to know if everything is okay. And when you make a distress call, no one actually follows up. And in my own opinion, I would say if only the government would be keen enough to follow up on its people. Even we have a lot of stories out there in the media, a lot of stories of our girls suffering, but there's no keen follow-up that is done. The moment you travel, there should be a way they can trace you and know your well-being. How are you doing? How is everything there? Are you okay? Are you being paid well? Are you being treated well? Is your employer abiding to the contract and the rules that are in the contract and everything that is in there? Is your employer abiding by it? And another thing, the agents. We have a lot of agents out there here. There are very many. And okay, I did a small research. In a number of them, they're not registered. But you wonder, like, how is it that they're able to take girls across the border? Because you cannot travel without a visa, a national passport. How is it that it's possible for an agent who is not registered to take people across the borders? That's one thing the government really needs to look into. And another thing, there's one thing my employer told me. She told me, like, there's nothing you can do. You have no power. This is my country. And I'm sorry to say, she told me, I can buy your government. Yeah. That was like the saddest thing I've ever had in my life. Someone telling you to your face that your country cannot save you, your own government cannot save. And that it sting hard. And okay, because I was there and I saw how other nations, how other governments are fighting for their own people. Just one phone call and the government is on the neck of those people, wanting to know what happened to their own. But in my case, it took like everyone making noise around social media and the governments, or okay, whoever is responsible, like waited long. The phone call I made, the plea I made, the request I made wasn't enough. They needed a lot of pushing for them to act. But I feel like the moment someone takes a call and says, I'm not okay, I need help, that is enough for one to go in and check. Because I remember if the people or the agents in our government really cared, I didn't have to suffer for 14 months. Because I remember I made a call on my first month. I made a call. I said that things were not okay. and it was ignored. No one responded. No one followed up to check if everything was okay. Even after I went silent for like so long, no communication with the outside world, no one followed up. The agent went silent, and everyone went silent. And I think that is a responsibility. I'll put it on myself. I don't know how I'll do it, but I don't know how I'll do it, but I believe I'll be the voice. I'll be the awakening voice, so that whenever a phone call is made, whenever a cry of help is heard, it should be like taken seriously and someone follows up.
Amazing.